Welcome to Abstract Illusions Radio with host Jennifer Hillman. The show explores and reveals the human potential through creativity. So enjoy the show to create a life you love.
Hello, this is Jennifer Hillman, and I thank you for listening to AIR. This show's guest is Danielle Dulsky. She is a wonderful writer who is a longtime activist for wild women spirituality and the divine feminine's return. She is an author of a coming out soon book in May of 2007 called Woman Most Wild, Liberating the Witch Within. It will be out May of 2017 from publishers New World Library. Danielle believes that all women are alive today are meant to be instrumental in the support of positive social transformation through wild women's spirituality, reclaiming the name witch and the magic of sisterhood. Danielle, thank you so much for being on air. And a pleasure to have Danielle. Please sit back and relax for this conversation. Thank you so much, Danielle, for being on here. You are an amazing presence and you are expanding amazing energy into this world. So I wanted to make sure to have you on air because you're kind of a breath of fresh air, a new breeze coming through that's just helping so many people reconnect with such a powerful part of themselves.
Thank you for having me, Jennifer. Thank you.
Now, I wanted to ask you first and foremost, how did this all open up? Your spirituality, the wild woman in you, the yoga, all of it. How did it transpire?
Well, the opening up the wild woman in me, that was a very long process that I feel like is still going on and probably will be going on until the day I die. But the yoga is an interesting story. My mother used to do yoga when I was little in our living room. And when she kind of went through her own dark night of the soul and became a full-on born-again Christian and all of a sudden believed that yoga was evil. And so I remember being intrigued at this, standing on your head and and chanting and doing these kind of esoteric practices that seemed really foreign and interesting to me when I was little. And then all of a sudden being told that they were of the devil. And at the same time, I'm being kind of dragged to these church, very evangelical church meetings on Friday nights and having these nightmares, like probably not all that different than nightmares that all children have, but my mother is kind of having these male pastors come and put their hands on my shoulders and try to take the evil out of me. And so it was this very strange few years. And the whole time, I'm still intrigued by this yoga practice, and particularly intrigued now that my mother says I can't do it. And so when I was, excuse me, when I was 15, I heard about this amazing yoga teacher. Her name was Kiran Mishra. And she was descended from the Saraswati people. That was what she said. So she was Indian and she had this very tantric yoga philosophy. And she was teaching in this kind of small, more of a fitness studio, very close to my house. And I really wanted to take her class. So I'm very young, really wanting to take her class. And my mother is telling me I can't do it. So I really want to do it. And so I convinced my father, who was certainly not born-again Christian, did not share my mother's religious beliefs at all. He was actually kind of a big manly biker who was very into breaking the rules. So he takes me to the class that I want to take with Kieran Mishra, and he signs the liability release for me that I needed because I was so young. And the rest is kind of history. I fell in love with it. Kieran was an amazing teacher who I'm positive does not remember me because I only took classes with her for about 6 months. I taught my first yoga class to my high school gym class when I was 16, and I've been teaching ever since.
So you knew that was the direction you wanted to go in a very young age.
Yes, from that first night, the class that she was teaching was not very asana driven. It was more meditation, and just everything that she said. She told this story about seeing a deer when she was driving home, and it was just the most beautiful tantric story. He was talking about Shakti and the deer. It was so young and not really understanding anything that she was saying, and yet fully understanding everything that she was saying. And I thought, I don't know what this is, but there is some magic here, and I want this to be my life. And it
Now,
has.
did the yoga open you up to the mystic side of you more than, or was there something else that opened you up to the witch within and the priestess and the
Mhm.
goddess? Was it, one stepped right into the other, or was there another event that really opened you up?
Yeah, I don't know if I can say there was an event. My interest in witchcraft really paralleled my interest in yoga. So it was another thing, of course, that totally went against my mother's religion in kind of a more severe way. So I was 12 and hiding tarot cards under my bed, and I lived very close to New Hope, Pennsylvania, which used to be and still is in a lot of ways a very witchy place. And there were all of these, pagan stores and these people that just were not the same people that I would meet at my mother's church on a Friday night.
That's for
And
sure.
so, as far as these paths really kind of diverged, I guess, from one another, yoga was kind of when my mother came to accept it, it was kind of this safer way, more socially acceptable way for me to explore my internal divinity. And it wasn't until, it wasn't until I was pregnant with my first son that I really like claimed the name witch. That I really was like, yes, this is what I am. I think there were a lot of hints along the way. There were a lot of clues, and in many ways, it's something that I've always known. But I didn't really own it until I was about 25.
Well, it's like when you were telling the story about the pastors coming to put their hand on you to get the devil
Mhm.
out of you. It's like, it's almost like a flashback when you were a witch in another lifetime and they were trying to get the devil out of you then. And to me, that
Yeah.
almost kind of shook the witch out of you and saying, "What are you doing, dude?"
Yeah. Exactly. And it was so, my memory of that is so vivid that, and it wasn't just one time. It was like I feel that it was years of my mom kind of praying for me and sensing that I, was going to be someone who was not going to support her religion at all and maybe would work a lot to dismantle it eventually. Um, and so there were a number of Bible studies and mornings at church where it would be specifically men and just kind of praying for me and giving my mother these different practices that she could do to help me. And me the whole time being really confused and thinking that I was just fine. Like there must be something really wrong with me because everybody else says there is, but I
Right.
feel fine.
So,
So
uh, when you started really embracing the powerful, I'm going to say the goddess, the witch, the
Mm-hmm.
priestess within you,
Mm-hmm.
and you started to hide it. When did you have the strength to say, no, this is who I am, and speak out? Was it through
Mm-hmm.
your writing, or did you just slowly just showed who you truly were and embraced it in the process?
Yeah, I don't think it was through my writing initially. I've always written, and I've always really looked at writing as kind of almost a supplemental skill. So I didn't really know for sure that it was that it was integral to my life's work until fairly recently. And when I claimed the name witch, that was kind of a painful process also, because I think that a lot of wild women, I actually just wrote an article on this, a lot of wild women go through this process of looking for external mentors. So there's this real painful experience of knowing yourself as divine, knowing yourself as the goddess, and yet still looking for external validation. And I think that it's a real common kind of a shared wound that we all
Mm-hmm.
have. It's almost like the initial like step on the fool's journey that
Yes.
we know we're on the right path, but we're still kind of looking for somebody to tell us that we're being a good girl. Um, and so for me, what that looked like was belonging to a few covens that were very predatory and in different ways. I was a part of one that was very small and very twisted and very into stealing each other's magic sexually. And there was this sense of like, I don't want to be a part of this. And so I was kind of distanced from a lot of the very bizarre practices that they were doing. And yet it was really my only connection to this new spirituality that I was discovering. So it was this very confusing time for me. And I was also a young mother, and it was just another kind of manifestation of patriarchy, really. And yet it was presented as feminist spirituality. So it was even more evil, I guess is the right word. So it wasn't until I really distanced myself from all of that. So after these experiences, then my marriage fell apart. And it wasn't until I moved back to Pennsylvania from Florida that I really kind of embraced my own sense of what being a witch means, and not having to belong to a traditional coven anyway, and
Right.
not having to be partnered with anybody to be powerful, not having to believe in any specific deity, not having to push my own beliefs on anybody else. Um, so it's been a long journey of discovery. It has not been an easy one,
Well,
and I don't think it is for anyone.
don't you think that's partly the lessons of truly owning your own power, but also the lessons of discernment?
Yes.
Going through this,
Mhm.
because I had similar things with going through the shamanic process with a shaman who is very powerful but evil, is the
Yeah.
only way. And I finally broke from her and found the power within myself from
Mhm.
breaking from her.
Mhm.
And then finding, after I spoke to another shaman locally that I in Tucson, that says shamans need to find their power within them and not necessarily take on or obviously believe just what somebody tells them. They need to find it within themselves. And that's part of the journey, I think, for all spirituality, is to really find who they truly are and own it.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think that it's important to kind of hold this deep knowing all the time that women have been uniquely harmed by the loss of the divine feminine. Like all of humanity has been harmed by the loss of the divine feminine. We've all been orphaned by the loss of the mother, but women in particular, especially in Western society where our gods are men, have this real void in them that if we don't protect it, if we don't guard it almost with all that we are, that different forms of oppression will really seep into that void. And so what I call wild woman spirituality is this reclamation of the divine feminine, but through this specific fusion of our soul, our sensuality, our individuality, our sexuality to our spirituality, because we've been told our whole lives that we can't do that, that we really need to keep our individuality completely separate from our spirituality, that spirit is something that is external to us.
Right.
And that there's really nothing more damaging to the feminine psyche than that, than being told that we are not divine and that we can't be, not just because we aren't gods, but because we aren't men.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's that fine balance of truly owning the feminine, but
Mm,
also owning the masculine within us that gives us
yeah.
that strength to hold on to the feminine, and it's that balance, and men have trouble with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
um and it's funny, I was talking to someone, it's like men have trouble with women they can't control.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
um
They do, don't they?
yes. So with the practices within the wild woman's spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
you have a healing modality. What is the process within that? Because you have water, fire, and earth, correct?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, so yes, I work with the elements a lot, and I look at the different elements in terms of the chakral system also. So for me, earth is, our ground, our stability. Anodea Judith says it's our right to be here. Um, and so the way earth informs my yoga as body prayer is in the stability, in like the planting your feet firmly on the muddy ground and saying, I am here. And then water is more the sensuality and the fluidity and also the creativity. So the movement and what I call the kriyas, which are repetitive actions with a purpose. So I've designed these different goddess kriyas that kind of align with divine feminine archetypes that feed our sensuality and nourish our creativity and also validate our emotions. So I do a lot of, we just had the Lilith Mala in Wolf Woman Autumn Camp, and the Lilith Mala is a totally different take on sun salutes because we're releasing rage. So instead of moving through this very kind of mechanical Kriya, we're beating the ground and we're howling and we're yelling. And if our body doesn't want to do this particular shape, we do something else. And so that's when we move into the fire element, which I feel like is probably one of the most important elements for women. Reclaiming righteous rage, feeling like you have the right to act and that your actions will have consequence. And outside of the yoga element, fire is very much magic and spellcraft also, because all of that is agency. All of that, like being able to cast a spell, if that's part of your practice, is really an act of reclaiming feminine agency. Like I have a right to use these forces and move these energies at my will. And so it's a very powerful ancient practice that I feel like is absolutely essential to reclaiming the witch as a wild healer and not, the twisted nosed green lady that lives in the castle with her flying monkeys.
Yes. Yes.
Although sometimes I really want to be that also.
But that's the righteous rage. So you can
It is.
be.
Yes.
So with all of this, the writing that you write is the writing that you do is so
Mm-hmm.
powerful in expressing
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
all of this magic that is present in allowing the feminine and the masculine to embrace that part of them, because I
Mm-hmm.
really it impacts men as well as women, but
Yeah.
women really it's just like we can breathe again. It's almost like a permission.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. That's what I want. I want to be a permission giver to to know yourself as divine. And I think that our language isn't sufficient in really describing what that means. It's hard to. It seems kind of fluffy and superficial when we say that. When I say, you are a she god. I think that there's this initial. Even the wildest woman has this initial kind of like, no, I'm not. Because we've been told our whole lives that we aren't. We have very, very deep seated beliefs that we aren't this cosmic infinite beauty. Um, and so, I'm going to write it everywhere I possibly can. And I'm going to tell it to every woman that will listen to me, um, because I think that that is absolutely essential to global healing. The
Oh,
reclamation of the feminine divine is the medicine.
you're not alone. In fact, many of your writings are on Rebel Society, and I almost feel like that's what Rebel Society really is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And
I think so too.
it is a very powerful place for women and men to reclaim their power
Yes.
and get the permission they're looking for. I know it really opened worlds for me, and every writer on there is just, they're all magical.
Yes,
I really
they are.
appreciate everyone on there.
Mm,
So,
yes.
what inspires you, and what is your writing process? Because your words are almost like little mystic stories.
Yeah, that's a hard question for me to answer. I am prolific in my writing. I write constantly. I write every day. And if I don't write, I feel almost like this pressure, like this very uncomfortable kind of feeling. And I'll feel it if I've gone 2 days or so without writing. And not everything I write is beautiful and something that I want anybody to read, even. Um, but I think that what inspires me a lot is these fairy tales and these myths that we have grown up with that have this really like deep connection with archetypes that are in our collective unconscious, and that really show you very powerfully how the feminine has been subjugated, and that we read these stories to our daughters still is, and almost kind of mechanically, it's like, well, I was read Sleeping Beauty when I was little, so it must be okay to read it to my little girl. When it isn't. Like, let's rewrite these fairy tales that have really screwed us.
And it's interesting because when the one book I remember my mom reading me was actually
Mm-hmm.
Bambi.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Nice.
and it's interesting because she disconnected from me, so it's like Bambi come to life for me
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
in a very strange way. My dad was very much outside my life, but really a part of it. So it's like if there's one story that really reflects my life, it would be Bambi. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And what my mother read to me was the Bible. So that was really, just as damaging. And I went to this born again Christian school until I was 12. That, when I think about the damage that does, like being in the Bible classes and having to color the pictures of um, Jezebel being tossed out the window, or like these pictures of men hurting women, like it's nothing, like like this is our holy religion, is just so. I mean, it isn't funny at all, but it's so like validating for me. Like, of course, I was meant to do this work. Like, of course,
yes,
every sign has pointed to this. So they are getting what they deserve. They kind of asked for me.
yes, and that's the thing. Things that happen in their childhood really are pointing you directly in line for what you're
Yes,
going to do. Whatever you're denied, that's exactly what you're going to be doing.
absolutely. Yes. And so, and all women are denied the divine feminine.
Yes.
Um, so, of course, we want that.
Believe it or not, the time is going really fast, but I do want to mention that soon you will be having a book coming out, Why Women Most Wild, Liberating the Witch Within. It's
Right.
coming out next year. Um,
Hmm.
is it similar to what your writings in the articles that you publish, or is it something totally different?
No, it is absolutely in the same voice as all of my articles. The book is really a condensed version of my philosophy on wild woman spirituality, and it is. An answer to a lot of the questions that I get asked all of the time. Like 90% of the emails and the Facebook messages and the Instagram messages, all of these questions that I get asked are all kind of about this one thing, which is I have found the wild woman within me. What do I do with her? What do I do with this new energy in a society that is telling me I have to keep her in a cage or in the broom closet, which is what I say in the book.
Yes.
So that is what the book is about, is how to liberate her most meaningfully, and different practices that women can do to cultivate her
And own her and let
and
her
everything.
live.
Yes.
You mentioned that you are on many social media. Where can people see more of your articles or get in touch with you?
Mm-hmm.
What is the best way they can?
Well, Facebook, Danielle Dulsky is my business page, so they can like my business page and message me through there. Or Instagram, I am Wolf Woman Witch, at Wolf Woman Witch. So either through those two avenues, or my website is danielledulsky.com, and they can email me through the website also.
Well, Danielle, it is awesome. Really, I thank you, dear lady, for being on the show and your work. It's awesome. And I want to thank your mom for doing what she did and pushing you in this direction.
Yes. Me too. Thank you, Jennifer.
It
It's been
is,
amazing to talk to you.
Well, you have many, many blessings coming to you as always, and I thank you. Anybody listening is being blessed to hear this. So I thank you very, very much, Danielle.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, I want to thank Danielle and thank you, the listeners, for listening to AIR. And with this, I say with each breath of air, we hope you gain new insights, information, and inspiration. Till next time, thank you for listening to Abstract Illusions Radio with your host, Jennifer Hillman.